Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Curtis Hulse, the Director of Athletics at Clearfield High School. Welcome to the podcast, Curtis.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our audience here in Utah and across the nation where you grew up, where you went to school, your first job, those types of things.
Okay. I was born and grew up in Wyoming. Born in just outside Jackson, a place called Star Valley.
And, pretty place.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous place. Gorgeous place. That's where my mom's from, and my dad was working for the Wyoming Game and Fish, where they met when they met there. And so yeah, I was born there, and then we moved around the state of Wyoming, small towns. From Star Valley, we went to a little place called Rock River, which is over just outside of Laramie, and then up to a beautiful place in the middle of the Bighorns, a little town called Tinsleep. And then we went from there to Casper, Wyoming, and that's where my dad retired from the Wyoming Game and Fish. And I was a junior in high school at that time. And Dad was from Ogden originally and was still pretty young. I mean, he started working for the Game and Fish right out of college, so he was still pretty young and still wanted to work and thought he had a better chance of getting a job back in Utah. So we moved back here to move to Utah. I said my dad was originally from Ogden, so we moved down here and settled. Mom and Dad bought a house in Sunset, and that's where we moved to. And that was in Clearfield High's boundaries at that time. So my last 2 years, 2 years of high school, I came here to Clearfield High School and had a good time with it. And after got done at Clearfield, I went to the College of Eastern Utah when it was CEU and Price. Walked on to tried to play basketball, broke my foot before I got down there, so that didn't go very well. So I didn't stay there very long and wound up going to Weber State and walked on there to play basketball and played for 1 year and enjoyed every second of that. Met a lot of great people up there and just went to Weber State and graduated with a degree in education, and history was my major. And my first job, I got lucky right out of college, got a job at North Davis Junior High, which is also right here in Clearfield, just down the street from the high school. And spent 5 years there, and then was lucky enough to get a job up here at Clearfield High, and I've spent the last 25 years here. So yeah, I'm going into my 30th year of education. I can't believe it's been 30 years. It's gone so fast. So
yes. That's incredible. Talk for a minute about, you probably had a little bit better opportunity once you moved to Clearfield for some youth sports, probably bigger town, but were you able to play any kind of Little League at all in those smaller towns in Wyoming? Talk about your involvement there.
Yeah. So the first place I was really exposed to sports was when we lived in Rock River. Now, Rock River is a real small town, and the only sports the high school had there were basketball and track. And so basketball was my first love, watching it as a kid. There was no Little League opportunities there. Then when we moved to Tinsleep, at first there were no youth sports opportunities there. I mean, obviously we played a lot as kids at school and stuff, but then they actually got a Little League baseball team started there. And so I got to play Little League baseball for a couple of years in Tinsleep. And I think that's where most kids probably get started playing Little League baseball. I love baseball to this day. That's the first sport I got to play. And basketball was the first sport I got exposed to. So sure. Yeah, when we moved to Casper, then there was a little more opportunity because Casper at that time was the biggest city in Wyoming, and so there was the opportunity to play youth sports, and Yeah, just that's where it started. And yeah, I just was involved, I played everything, in junior high and high school. And yeah, just football, basketball, baseball, ran track. So yeah, there were definitely more opportunities in Casper and down here in Utah than there were in those small towns in Wyoming.
I'm showing my ignorance a little bit here. I thought I was pretty good about Wyoming geography, and I've stayed in Casper, been to Casper, obviously been to Star Valley, been to Jackson numerous times. But those first two towns you mentioned, just give me an idea of what they're kind of close to.
Okay, so Rock River is close to the closest to Rock River is Laramie. So Laramie is about
Okay.
45 miles from Rock River. And then
Which way?
Rock River is going to be to the southwest a little bit of Laramie.
Okay.
And Ten Sleeps, like I said, right up in the middle of the Bighorns. And the closest quote unquote big town to Laramie would be, or sorry, to Ten Sleep would be Worland. And Worland was about 35 minutes to the east, or sorry, to the west of Ten Sleep. And Worland wasn't a really big town. Worland was probably 20,000 maybe at that time.
Okay. Perfect. Let's have you talk for a moment about the mentors in your life, the people that made a difference to you, and share that with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Really lucky you have great parents. I've learned so much from my parents, and I'm so grateful that they were my parents. They are my parents, because people kind of laugh when I say this, but they weren't my friends when I was a kid. They were my parents. They were hard. They were tough, and I'm to this day so appreciative of the fact that they made me do my schoolwork and all those things. And I learned hard work from them, but ethic of hard work and honesty was a big thing in our household. And to this day, I take great pride in being honest. Sometimes it gets me in trouble because people don't like what I say, but I say what's not right. But that's just how I was raised. And had great grandparents too. Same idea. Hardworking people. That's kind of a thing that's echoed throughout my family is hard work and honesty, and loyalty. Loyalty was another big thing from parents and grandparents. And then like everybody else, had great teachers, so many teachers that helped me along the way and made a difference in my life. Probably the biggest one when we moved to Casper, Wyoming, had a coach, and I went to a real small school. It was a K-8 school, and everybody was in the same building. But our coach was a guy named Dan Alexander, and that guy, he's one of those guys at the time. I took his name in vain and was upset with him, as he was so tough and so hard. But now as you look back, it's like, man, I'm glad I ran into that guy. And I really looked up to him, because the year before I got to that school, his wife taught at that school as well, and her and two other teachers on their way to school one morning were all killed by a drunk driver just the year before I got there. And so Mr. A, as we called him, he coached every sport in the school and raised his daughter by himself. And I just always admired, his daughter meant everything to him. And that's one of the things I always talked about, is how important family was. So he was a tremendous influence on me. And then at the Natrona County High School in Casper, another coach named Mike Reagan, who was our basketball coach, football coach. Just so much fun to play for. He was tremendously influential with me. And then down here, I moved to Clearfield High School. I had a great social studies teacher named Mr. Fishburne, Jerry Fishburne, who just made me feel welcome. I mean, came into school had already started my junior year, didn't know anybody, and he just made me feel so welcome and helped me so much here. Always be grateful for him. And there are just so many others. It's just, I've been lucky. I've been really lucky to be exposed to a lot of great people, and had a lot of help along the way.
Let's have you share for a moment your background before you became an AD. So obviously that would include your time at the junior high, and then remind me, because I'm not sure exactly how long you've been the director of athletics at Clearfield. I know it's been a long time. So
Yeah.
share how that came to pass and how you got into that.
Yeah, sure. So when I was hired at North Davis Junior High, I was the boys basketball coach at the junior high. I coached track at the junior high, and at the same time, I was coming up to Clearfield High School and coaching sophomore football. And so did that for 5 years. Coached basketball at the junior high for 5 years. Coached track all 5 years I was there, and like I said, coached sophomore football, and was coming up and helping do sophomore basketball because our junior high basketball season was early, and so I was able to come up and help Clearfield High with sophomore basketball. And then when I got hired here as a teacher, I coached track for 12 years. I coached football for 20 as an assistant, and was an assistant in the basketball program. And the last 17 years, I was the head coach of boys basketball here at Clearfield. This was the first year I didn't coach. I got out last year. So I did a lot of coaching, helped my brother. My brother's a volleyball coach up here in northern Utah. A couple years I wasn't coaching football. I went and helped him. Really enjoyed that. And then as far as the AD, we had an AD when I was first here, and you may have knew him, Bruce Trimble. Bruce is a great guy, and Bruce unfortunately had cancer. And he fought cancer for 14 years, and it was just so sad because every time he thought he beat it, he'd get great checkups and was cancer free, and then all of a sudden, like a year later, it'd come back. And he went through that 3 or 4 times, and the last time it got into his bones, and unfortunately, it's nothing they could do for him. But I mean, the guy fought it for 14 years, just courageous. And that last year, the chemotherapy he was on, he couldn't go out and line the fields. That's back when we still had grass fields. And I just told Bruce, I said, let me do it for you. I just wanted to help, wanted to take a little bit of burden off him. And so I just started lining the football fields and the practice fields, and just try to help him out. I mean, he was still coming to school as much as he could, and was still doing all the paperwork and that. But I just, felt so bad for him, and just said I wanted to help any way I could, so he could, spend a little more time at home and that, and not have to worry about some things. And unfortunately, Bruce passed away in March of 2013, and my principal just came to me the following week and just said, I'm not going to open this up. I want you to be the AD. It's not something I planned on doing, and wasn't sure at first honestly if it's something I wanted to do, because I knew there was so much responsibility with it. But I did it, and I'm glad I did. And it was a little rough at first, taking over for Bruce, who did such a great job, and trying to figure things out, and I never really talked to Bruce about the finer details of being an athletic director. Because like I said, that wasn't something I wanted to do. I was just trying to help him out. And yeah, that's how I became the AD, and been the AD since.
Great background, which leads us to our next question. You've been the athletic director for 10 years now. Share with our audience how the job of athletic administrator has changed just in the 10 years that you've had the job.
Wow.
Well, excluding COVID, because that's everybody pulls into COVID, but let's put COVID aside and talk about other things.
Yeah. It's changed quite a bit. I mean, just like teaching's changed. The expectations of kids and parents, as far as the programs, and everybody thinks, it's not easy. It's not easy to win. I mean, winning's difficult, and everybody just thinks that you just roll out and you win, and that's not the case. It's hard. So I've noticed a shift in that. We have great community support here. We're lucky, but there's a lot more expectations now. Just the addition of sports and to the high school seasons. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's not. It's a good thing, but it makes it challenging. Especially, you look at like this spring, if boys volleyball would have been in place this spring, it would have been, I'm not sure what we'd have done, but we would have figured it out. But, so the addition of sports, takes a little more time, and, obviously the organization for all those additional sports, it takes a little more time, but, I just say, yeah, the expectations that people have, and, just the addition of sports, those are probably the two biggest changes I've seen in the 10 years.
Let me ask you this, a question that was not on the list I sent you. You're right there next to Hill Field. I know you and Northridge and Layton, probably the three schools I think would be affected by that. And I want to know, is the Hill Field, is that a positive? Is it a negative? Is it a neutral? I mean, I would understand that there's Air Force kids coming and going, so there's a little bit of transient population there, but having not lived next to an Air Force base, I want to know what the effect, either positive or negative, that is on your school.
Yeah, well, when I first started, we got a lot of the Hill Air Force Base kids, and yeah, you're exactly right. A lot of moving. Kids would be there one year, and then family would get shipped somewhere else for the next year. So that could be challenging. Right now, as it sits, we at Clearfield High, we don't hardly get any Hill Air Force Base kids. They all go mostly go to Northridge or Layton. But yeah, you're exactly right. When we had those kids, it was you just never knew who was going to be there from year to year. And we lost some great kids, some really good athletes, and because their families got up and moved, and you always hate to see it, but same time, you're very appreciative of those kids and those families for what they do for our country. So, you just wish them the best and hoped everything worked out for them.
Let me ask you a little bit of a personal question, Curtis. What's your biggest failure or disappointment in life, and what did you learn from it?
Wow, that's a good question. I've had a lot of, I like everybody else, I experienced a lot of failures, a lot of letdowns. There were a couple jobs, basketball jobs I hoped I would get that I didn't, that it hurt. But I think the important thing there is, and I think most people would agree with this, I learned more from defeat and losses and coaching and not getting jobs and stuff like that. I learned more from those than successes, and I just think that's to me that's the important thing. We're all going to fail, and what we learn from those things is, to me, the most important. You just can't let the setbacks hold you back, and I think that's something that kids are kind of missing these days. It's kind of getting to that point where obviously we don't want kids to fail, and I understand that, but I think, if we taught kids how to deal with failure instead of trying to prevent it, I think that would go a long way to helping kids.
Great advice. Let's talk for a moment about the Utah Association, the UIAAA. Talk about your journey with the UIAAA, how you became involved, how you're on the athletic director executive committee now, and speak for a moment about the recent conference we just had in St. George.
Yeah, UIAAA has been very, very helpful. So that's one of the things I didn't even know about, when I first became an AD. So learning about the UIAA and the classes that were offered, my first year as AD, my principal sent me to the AD conference, the first time I'd ever been, and she's like, find some classes you need to take. And I went down and took the law classes, which I'm glad I did, because I learned so much. I had no idea on some of those things, and I'm so glad I took those classes. And so the classes that are offered and that have been helpful. ADEC, Ted Peterson, Coach Pete a few years ago, just called me and asked me if I'd be a region rep for ADEC, and once again, it's one of those things I heard about, but I didn't know much about at all. And wow, learned so much at those meetings. I enjoy those meetings. It's nice to, you kind of get to see the things that kind of go on behind the scenes a little bit with the UHSAA, and I just helpful, very informative meetings. Learned so much through those there as well. And this conference down in St. George, I haven't been able to go the last few years, just been so busy, and I was able to go this year. And once again, I enjoyed the, especially the parts with the members of the UHSA, just being very open and honest with us about, this is what's going on, and this is what we're trying, and this is what we're thinking about. I always enjoy those. It's good to hear from them. And then, just different breakout sessions that are offered. It's always nice to hear. I like hearing from other ADs, and how they do things. And I always go away, from those meetings learning, so much. So yeah, it's so appreciative of the UIAA and the opportunity to be on ADEC. It's been great.
What's one common myth about being an athletic administrator that you'd like to debunk?
I think for my school here, it's that I have this ability, I have this power to hire and fire people, and that I have all this money laying around somewhere, which isn't the case. So for our school and some of the people here, it's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't get to make those decisions, and I wish I had $5,000 to give you so you could get your stuff. But yeah, I think that's a couple of those things.
And the line of coaches goes out the door thinking that you have that excess money. I don't know that that's ever going to change. Yeah. What's the favorite part of your job, Curtis?
Oh, just interacting with my coaches. I told my coaches that, my whole goal is that on game days, you just show up and coach. We'll get everything set up and ready to go. And, I just enjoy talking with them after the games. And, they know they can come in here and vent. I have an open door policy. They can come in and let steam off. And, we talk about the games and, kids. And, I guess now that I'm the old guy here, that it's nice to, I just feel good that I can, give some advice and, try to help the younger coaches out. That's the part of the job I really enjoy.
Excellent. Let's finish with a couple of questions. The first one being, you've got 2 suggestions for a brand new AD, and they need to follow your suggestions in order to be successful. What would your 2 suggestions be?
Oh, so for a new AD, just going off my experience as a new AD, not coming in, when I took over here for Bruce, there was no job description at the school, and the district didn't have a job description. So I was like, I knew a few things, but not, like I said, not very much. So my first suggestion for new ADs would be to, use your fellow ADs. I was on the phone constantly with other ADs in our area, like Kelly Anderson down at Syracuse High, and Jeff Emery at Viewmont. Dave Hoke was still the AD at Northridge at that time. And those guys probably got tired of hearing from me, but just trying to learn the job, I was reaching out to those guys all the time. Like I said, I really didn't have a great understanding of the job. So that'd be my first suggestion is, use people around you and reach out to ADs in your area, your region. And then the second one would be, just organized. Just, there's so much going on with scheduling of buses and officials and stuff. Just the more organized you can be, the better off you're going to be. So I think those 2 things. And if I could throw in a third, I'd say don't be afraid to take a day off here and there, because just a little mental break here and there really, really helps as well.
Now that is a great suggestion. We've had similar thoughts from just in the past 2 months of podcast. One of the ADs said to make sure you don't eat your lunch at your desk, which I was always guilty of that. And it's so right. Sometimes you just need to get out there. So that's great advice, Curtis. Thanks for sharing. Let's finish up with this question. which I stole from someone else. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
Oh, geez, that's that's another good one. Not sure. What should you have asked me? Wow, I can't really think of one. Yeah, I can't think of one, Hutch. I don't know.
All right. Not a problem then. With that, that wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection, which again, our guest today has been Curtis Hulse, the Director of Athletics at Clearfield High School. Curtis, thanks so much for being on the show.
Hutch, thank you, and thank you for all you've done for us here in Utah with the ADEC and UIAAA. We all really appreciate it.
Thanks. I appreciate it for our listeners. We hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.